Hello and welcome to Life Beyond the Numbers, the podcast where we share stories, insights and strategies that go beyond some of the numbers we encounter in our work life. I'm Susan Lee. I work with organisations who put people first. I've lived and worked in many countries. I've met people who love what they do and people who don't. People who bring their full selves to work and people who won't. And together with my guests, we place a lens on and focus in on the people side of work life. Because we know that it is people who do the work, not numbers. And if we are treated well, we will perform well and might even generate better numbers. Today, I am delighted to be joined by Ella Clark. Ella, you are so welcome to Life Beyond the Numbers.
Thank you, Susan. I'm delighted to be here too.
And as we record this, it is the beginning of a new year. And oftentimes, I suppose, new year, it's time to reflect and look ahead as well and think about, right, what am I going to do this year? What am I going to get right? Am I going to balance something? Am I going to improve something? But what about leaving room for the element of surprise, Ella?
Yes, well, this is really interesting. And I got into this during lockdown because we were having such sort of flat lives. And I kept reading about languishing. And it occurred to me that we were missing that element of surprise. And what did surprise do to our lives? So when you look into it, surprise adds that sort of, obviously, element of surprise, but it does more than that. It takes your brain on a little journey and you go through, you start thinking about things, it fires you up. I mean, I think it actually says when you have an MRI scan, it lights up your brain, this area of your brain, like a Christmas tree. And it also fires off dopamine, which is one of the drugs, the happiness drug, and a drug that keeps us motivated as well, our own little chemical score. So in terms of surprise, shifting your mindset and putting you into a bit more of a positive outlook, it's really, really fascinating.
It is, isn't it? And what surprises us, I suppose, you can't go looking for it either, can you? Or can you?
Well, this is the other thing. We're sort of used to managing surprise, so we might manage surprise as it goes along. But the lockdown situation, we just weren't doing things. So it was trying to get those natural surprises in. So that was why the idea of going on walks, getting into nature, and suddenly seeing something. Right, you might suddenly see a seal in a cove, and that's a massive surprise. And you'd get that natural sort of the antidote to languishing, through nature, but also you'd get this surprise and the dopamine and the happiness chemicals. So it was a win-win situation. So yes, you can actually think, how can I get more surprise in my life?
It's really interesting what you say about nature, actually, because, well, through Christmas here in Oxford, we had grey skies pretty much every day. It was low light, grey skies and everything. And yesterday I went out for a walk and saw the most glorious sunset. Yeah. And it just changed everything. I mean, it was such a surprise. And even though the sun sets every single day, the light, everything about it just did what you're saying.
Yes, yeah, it's amazing, isn't it? And so there are other little ways you can create your own sort of surprise or your own sort of happy chemicals. You might, for instance, if you're going to work, you get off a stop earlier, a stop later. You try a different route to walk. Whatever you try and do, just mix it up a bit. And that keeps your brain firing, looking for these little rewards that keep you stimulated and stop you feeling flat and languishing. And as we know, languishing is really a code word for starting to feel a little depressed. And that's something that we all need to look at, particularly now with mental health being so sort of on the agenda. Yeah, so add some surprise into your life, or get out there and give people some surprises. Go around with that bunch of flowers, cook a meal for them, and that will do far more than telling them you're going to do something, because you've got the added element in there.
Oh, that's lovely.
Yeah.
And we're not used to doing that, I think. We like to plan everything, but that's so nice. Just turn up on someone's doorstep or invite them around for dinner. Cool. Yeah, and easy to do. Well,
yes, it is.
Once we can move freely again, of course.
Yes. Yeah.
But there are some surprises that may not be so welcome.
Well, absolutely. And this is where this is an interesting topic really around reframing, because, for example, a lot of people, myself included, were during lockdown. Some people made redundant and all their jobs shifted and changed, career transitions. Again, this is surprise, and some people it may actually have a negative effect and they may have negative associations. So again, if you can think, right, this is a surprise, I'm going to reframe this, and I'm going to shift my thinking and think, what opportunity does this bring? Now, I'm sure there'll be people out there who will roll their eyes in horror at this. We've all been in situations where it is a bad situation, let's just suck it up. However, there is a silver lining. Every situation has a silver lining. So to try and reframe it, and yes, I've been made redundant, but actually I've been doing this role for so many years, and I've always wanted to go on a sabbatical, go and volunteer, take some time out with the children to do X, Y, Z, whatever. There is always an opportunity, and it's a very stoic philosophy. And looking at life sort of existentially, really, this is happening around me. I can't control it, but what can I do to make the most of this opportunity?
Yeah, and I often think as well, Ella, when it comes to work, for example, and this is a lot about work and what makes work life more fulfilling, but for a lot of people, their identity is very much tied up into their work. And so if something like your job is taken away from you, then it speaks to the core, perhaps, of who you think you are.
Absolutely. This is really an important point, actually, because you're right, for example, people in the professions, particularly the caring professions, it's very much tied up in who they are. They aren't just a nurse, they aren't just a doctor. That is their personality, that's their identity. It's not just a role. The issue here is when that's taken away from them, or when they realise they can't do this role, is what is their identity underneath that? Who actually are they? And how do they continue without that identity and that purpose in life that's been really focused on one role?
So how?
Well, there's a very good expression, actually. Now, lots of people, we've used the expression, the glass ceiling, leaning in, lots of all these different expressions. The one that I love at the moment is pivot. And you can pivot intentionally, and you can think, right, I'm going to reframe this, I'm going to pivot, and I will look at my identity, and I will look at everything about my identity, and I will create a role and an identity that actually suits me, because you're not just one fixed identity. I think this is a thing that people sometimes is great to help people understand, actually, is that this one big career throughout life is a bit of a myth. We've got hybrid careers, hybrid working, flexible careers, portfolio career. We can have different careers, different identities, and there's a lot now about multi-potentialites. And I read a thing, and it was on TED, actually, people can look it up, and it's multi-potentialites with Emily Wapnick. It's a really interesting way to reframe. You're not just good at one thing for the rest of your life. You can have different things that you're equally good at. You can sort of start again and be just as good. And that is your new identity. Or it's not even a new identity. It's just revealing a different identity.
Absolutely. And that's so interesting. When I was leaving my last job and trying to decide what I wanted to do next, and I had all sorts of ideas, somebody shared that TED talk with me about multi-potentialite. And it is a really different way of looking at things. And yeah, because we do want to hang on to one thing that we think we're good at. And one of the things that motivates us is mastery. And so if you want to master one thing, it's hard to think that you could master several things.
And I totally agree. And I think that is one of life's pinnacles of achievements, to master something. But reframing again, or sort of looking at this in a different way, you're also mastering different skill sets and different aptitudes and different character traits. So it's really just, again, looking at these carefully. What are your values? What are your strengths? What is your skill set? And how can you wrap these up? We talked at one time about the power of three, and this is a really good sort of way to help. Just do a quick exercise and think of the three things that you love. Think of three fantastic skills you have, and look at their intersection, where they sort of come together. Is there a career that you could follow with that? And invariably, you become quite good at this, you've mastered this already. So it's not too much of a leap to start again. And you're quick, a multi-potentialites are very quick. They're good at absorbing information, they're good at going forward and using their skills. So if you're feeling, I've got to try and sort one big career out, otherwise I'm a failure, or I'm too flaky or indecisive, that's not the case. You're possibly a multi-potentialite and you've got everything going for you.
And the other thing, I think what you said earlier is it's about creating.
Yes.
Isn't it? You don't have to follow the beaten track or the worn track or the career ladder. You can create something that works for you.
Yes, absolutely. And I was thinking of a metaphor, because I love my metaphors and storytelling. And you know, the expression "you're a round peg in a square hole" pops up. And that's useful. Does the cultural fit work for me in an organisation? Do I need to get out of this culture? Is it not actually right? And people might struggle to look for their square hole. And actually, if you could see yourself as more of a multifaceted diamond, you can actually create your own space in life. You are strong enough. You've got the strength within you to create your own space in life and look for a role that will suit you.
That is such a beautiful image, a multifaceted diamond, sparkling.
Yeah.
Help other people sparkle and shine too, if you know what lights you up, I guess.
Yeah, and that's the other thing why it does, when you can see it visually, and you can, if you see yourself like a diamond, you know, and you can think, well, maybe I'll angle myself this way, or maybe I'll dust down one of my facets or polish it up. And I haven't used that for a long time. I'd love to use that. That would be purposeful. That would give me purpose in life. That would give me some meaning. Gosh, why haven't I done that for a long time? And it's about this creating. Lots of people, myself included, we wake up, you know, the classic midlife crisis. Oh my gosh, should I be doing this? How did I get up here? How did I get into this role? I ended up doing financial communications for large corporates. Now,
that's what you did.
That's what I did.
Okay.
Yes.
And you ended up, you said, so that wasn't what you set out to do.
No, I don't know how I ended up. I mean, I'm very adaptable, I'm very flexible, and so I took opportunities when they came along, but I didn't necessarily think intentionally about it, and I didn't take any breathing space. So I think a lot of people can do this. And it's not exactly sleepwalking through life, but it's ending up somewhere where you think, hang on, I've actually got a huge amount of skills and experience and I want to do this. Let's take the time out. And I've still got 30, 50, however many years. Let's work for a different phase and let's create something that will actually work for me intentionally.
So when you found yourself or woke up as a financial communications person, what was next? What unfolded from that?
So I did realise this. I had this epiphany, and basically I was one of the classic people that start to have a bit of a burnout situation. But I ended up in a cardiac ward with some sort of unknown classification, and I'm pretty sure it's due to stress, and I'm pretty sure it's due to being burnt out. I said all the classic things. I'm so tired, and I was getting quite I can cope with anything. I can cope, and I thought it was a brain thing. Of course, as the book says, the body keeps the score. And in a situation at work, you can be resilient, you can cope, but there are some times when you actually need to realise that it's not working and there needs to be a shift. And that's when the reframing, and shall I do a sabbatical? Shall I have a career change? And that's when I realised this wasn't working for me. It wasn't leading me where I wanted to go. I was just going to get burnt out, exhausted. And so I stopped. I literally stopped, had my epiphany, and realised that I could take control. And I ended up taking 2 years and going off to VSO. And this was mid-40s, so it's quite a big thing to do. Yeah, so I volunteered in the Philippines.
Yeah, so VSO is the volunteer service overseas.
Yes.
For those that mightn't know about it. And what did you do in the Philippines for 2 years?
So I worked with the disability sector, and I worked with consultants, which is how I got into the sort of project management consultant area. It's a great thing to do, actually. It's really, you can sort of term it as a career sabbatical as well as volunteering. So again, reframing to make things actually fit into your career and your CV is really powerful. So I did that. And then I was in a library in Manila looking up how to run advocacy groups for people with disabilities. They call them PWDs in the Philippines. And a book under P or D fell off, and it was documentary making. And I read it and I thought, wow, this is fantastic, because documentaries or short films are sort of transcend culture, they transcend language and different types of people. So I just started doing this, and this ended up with me doing a master's at Sussex University in digital documentary.
Wow. So from a hospital bed to the Philippines for 2 years to digital documentary masters. Amazing.
Yes. Yeah, and it was. And again, it was quite a surprise. But these surprises, you can call them epiphanies, you can call them, I don't know what you call them. It's almost like a herald, isn't it? You know, waving a magic wand or something. But you could take advantage of it. You know deep down what you need to be doing. I was very lucky in the Philippines. I had a coach, and that coach was very, very supportive. And I remember the phrase that they kept saying was, I would come up with reasons, and they would just say, why not? And I go, why not? And when they say why not several times, again and again and again, that's when you start to realize that you are actually limiting yourself. You've done that classic thing of putting your own limitations in. So when someone keeps saying why not, your excuses seem to just sort of evaporate, because you realize that other people have done this and there's absolutely no reason that you can't do this. Whether it's, I've got a house, I've got a mortgage, I've got dogs, there are always solutions. And the why not suddenly made me realize, yes, why not?
So it's even reframing the why not.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
And where do the excuses come? Like, what stops us, Ella? You know, what is in the way?
I think it's this little thing about reframing and having a positive outlook, limiting beliefs. We've all heard of that. And these terms get sort of used a lot, and we hear them. You're a people pleaser, you've got imposter syndrome, or whatever it might be. People tell themselves stories. We tell ourselves stories, and we sort of believe these stories, whether it's, I'm a technophobe, I didn't do very well at school. We tell ourselves these stories and our brain starts to believe them. So it's really, really important just to notice what stories you're telling around yourself, because this affects your identity, going back to identity. And one thing I noticed about identity is that I've got an identical twin sister. And this is quite interesting because we grew up in the same situation. We've got the same genes. One would think we've got the same skill set, roughly. There's a bit of a debate. And yet we travel our totally separate lives. And this made me realize, gosh, Nancy, my sister, she's created this life. I've created this life. And I just sort of thought, wow, it's actually possible to create different lives for yourselves. The film business has been doing this and making lots of money, proving that people can make different lives and showing films about it. But to actually do this in your own life and think, okay, I'm going to create a slightly different life that's going to really work for me. And that might include revealing a different identity behind the scenes I haven't necessarily revealed before. One of your facets.
Yeah. And are you revealing a different identity, or are you awakening something that was perhaps dormant within you?
Oh, I like that. Yes, absolutely. The phoenix rising out of the ashes. Yes, it doesn't really matter. And this is why I love metaphors, because if someone said that, then that's where they would get their passion from, because they would feel that they're waking something up that's been dormant and sleeping. So that would be great for them. So, and that would give them the motivation to move forward in a new phase in their lives.
So metaphors, storytelling, documentary making.
Yeah.
What have you done with that? Where did that take you?
Gosh, I'm not really sure. Let's have a think. Documentary making. I suppose I use that in my work, in my coaching quite a bit, because I'm really interested to hear people's stories and to help them see themselves. We've all heard about the hero's journey, perhaps, and Joseph Campbell. To see yourself as a heroine, or a hero in the journey, and to see yourselves as actually this will have a positive outlook, this will have a positive, not necessarily solution, but my journey, my progress, I'm going to see this all positively. I'm not going to waste my life worrying. Gosh, I'm not going to waste my life worrying about my house I can't quite buy. I have to get on. I have one brilliant, I think it was a poem I saw recently. You have one wild and precious life. How are you going to live it? So let's not waste time. Let's see ourselves in this great story and create our own endings or our own journey on that story.
So your, I suppose, background in storytelling helps other people to see their life as a story. Is that kind of what you're...
A little bit, yes. I mean, my background is quite diverse. I've got a scientific background. I've done lots of various things with consumer behaviour and marketing and communications. I used to be a nurse. So I've got lots of different elements I can bring in neuropsychology, neuroscience. And I do believe the story element of the act that we can take people through. So I suppose it's just something to add to the toolkit that can help reframing, that can help see yourself and give yourself a positive outlook in life, rather than tell yourself a story that actually isn't serving you very well. For example, I got married and had children too young. Therefore, I didn't fulfill my potential. And that's one story. You could say, I've done this and now I'm ready to do a different phase in my life. And I've got lots of skills that I learned by doing that so young, and it's great, and a different story will evolve.
Do we use metaphors a lot as well to describe where we're at?
Yes, people do. And this is fascinating. Someone might say, I just can't see the wood for the trees. And that's a great one, because we might say, okay, well, so if you could see the wood for the trees, where would you go? Now, some people might see a door. If they see a door, that would imply that something is shut. And then we'll think, what's shut for you? What would you like to be opened? And that might be there's somebody stopping them at work, someone's blocking them at work, or that's how they feel. Someone else might see, oh, I just want the clearing where I can rest and when I can relax. We might look at that, and it might be they're overworked, they've taken on too many projects. Let's look at slimming things down and delegating more. So in work, metaphors can be really powerful to understand how they're actually feeling about their jobs. Even if they can't necessarily tangibly see it, they will come out with some metaphors that will really reveal it for everybody.
So is a metaphor almost like a protective mechanism for you yourself if you're going through a difficult situation at work? Rather than actually acknowledging how you're feeling about it, you describe it in that way, or that you don't want to go there, so you just wrap it into a little phrase?
Yeah, I think that's a really great way of framing it, actually. Yes, I think there's this sort of disconnect between our unconscious and our conscious. And that's when you know the phrase cognitive dissonance comes in, and you just get that feeling, that uneasy feeling, something isn't quite right. You don't want to believe it. You don't want to believe you've got to address this thing for whatever. You might love your work. You don't want to believe you're becoming burnt out, even though you might be constantly dreaming of little fires that you're putting out in your sleep. So these metaphors do come out. And I suppose, yes, we are revealing in our metaphors what we really think, what our unconscious or subconscious is really believing about a situation or about us. And it's something that I really enjoy doing with people, is asking them to think of a metaphor, and they'll come up with some fantastic things. I had someone who was a canary, a yellow canary in a mine, and she was with some bats, and the bats were lovely and they were very friendly, but they weren't actually canaries like herself. And she could see through the top of her cave other canaries flying around. So we just sort of worked on that. Well, what message will they give to you? Oh, well, I will come out one day and I've just got to wait for my chance. And that was really supportive. And that metaphor really made her realise that in her life, she might be surrounded by bats rather than canaries, or not enough like-minded people, but there is a solution. She will get through it. So yes, these metaphors are pretty fascinating, and it's one of the most, the storytelling element is really creative, really fun, and it's just a great way to reframe your life and how to move forward in your life.
And do some people struggle with that?
Some people can't naturally get towards a metaphor, but invariably you can help them. And some people will say things like, I've just got to tackle that. And they'll do the hand in the hand. I've got to tackle that. And you've got one people on one side and one on the other. And I've just got to force my way forward. And they'll start using war analogies. And it's pretty evident as I reflect back that they are in a war or a battle with themselves and other people. And so once you've sort of illuminated that, they might not necessarily want to continue with that analogy, but it does shed or shine a light on how they might be feeling. And actually, if they're looking for a role or work where they've got to be more collaborative, and if they're having problems of being collaborative, to approach meetings in this war terminology and using war metaphors, battle, I've got to battle in this meeting, it's them and us, and they are the enemy. So it's not going to be a very productive meeting.
No, it's not, is it? And then that comes as a surprise. Also to that person, I guess, who never really thought that that's how they thought.
Absolutely, yeah. And that's why I love doing coaching, because it is incredibly creative, and everyone's, I can't remember what it's called when you've got that sort of undisclosed area that you don't know about.
Is this like in Johari's window?
Johari's window,
yes.
That's right. The bit that you can't see, that no one else can see.
Yeah.
And there are always bits that other people can see that you're not aware of. And to have that open-mindedness and to be willing and curious about yourself and actually think, I do have these areas that I can't see, but someone else has illuminated it. So yeah, it's great.
Yeah, that is fun. So it is the beginning of a new year. And yes. I think it is a time when people do think about, where do I want to be maybe this time next year, or at the end of this year, or at summer. So how does someone start if they're curious about reinventing themselves or creating a different life or a different ending? What would you advise them to do, Ella?
Well, I think there's some great tools out there, actually. There's a really lovely one which I use quite a lot. It's called Reason for Being. And I don't know if you know it, but it's got the areas, so the reason of being in the middle, and it's got elements like, what are you good at? What do you love? What's your purpose? What's your mission? You fill it in. And the whole sort of physicality of writing as well really helps, because again, it's that link between neurology and physical, heart, hands and head all together. And I would say look up Ikigai and try and just fill that out, and that might help you understand areas where you naturally want to follow your passion that will give you an income and a career transition. Another really good one is a spectrum of possibilities. Now I like this because if you ask people, what would you like to do if you weren't a nurse, whatever, we've got a lot of very disengaged nurses who are really feeling the strain. They might not have any idea because they've been doing it for a long time, or have a mindset and they're just not sure what they could be doing. If you think, why do you love nursing? And then try and distill that into a purpose. I love nursing because it's caring for people and it's helping people who blah, 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 whatever your reason is. And then if you can actually write different elements or different ways of fulfilling that top purpose, 1 to 10, it's a really powerful way of realizing that you can have a career transition without throwing everything away that you've worked so hard for. So you can still care for people, you can still use your transferable skills, but being a nurse might actually look different if you think of 10 different ways to help people in a medical situation, for example. So yes, it is really digging down deep and opening up your mind and your eyes and looking at every opportunity out there so you don't limit yourself inadvertently.
And then talking to people as well, presumably, seeing what other people that you know maybe went and did something else. Yes.
Yeah. I think, yeah, this is really interesting as well. I mean, see yourself as a project, Project Susan, Project Ella. How would you start this off? Well, you'd do little pilots, wouldn't you? You'd go off and you do little tests. And I think in the entrepreneurial world, they're called shift projects. So you would go off, you would say, I'm just going to do a short 2 weeks volunteering with somebody. I'm going to shadow somebody. I'm going to research this. I'm going to pay for a week's tuition in XYZ. Again, the element of surprise, you're adding more surprise into your life. You're reframing things positively, you're trying things out, and then see where you are at the end of a few weeks or months doing that. And that's your sort of research phase. And I think, again, using that entrepreneurial model at work, it's called the double diamond. I don't know if you've heard of this.
No.
You diverge and then you converge.
Oh, yes.
You diverge and you converge. So you've got 2 diamond shapes. And the first one, in diverging, going out, you're exploring as many things as possible. And so you can feel fine about it. You don't have to feel overwhelmed. You don't have to feel I've got to pick the right one. You can diverge. Then you can converge and come back, and you can try and focus and think which one suited me, which one and why. And then you might want to look at the possibilities again, using this as a focus. So I'm going to try these 6. So you convert, diverge again and converge. So it's a really useful way of understanding that you can look for a lot of different things to start with and not feel indecisive. Again, it's using the skills of a multi-potentialite, really, just gathering up all your skills and just trying different things.
And there's also, I think, perhaps asking other people what your skills are, or what they think, 3 things they can say about you that are positive. Because sometimes it's back to what you were saying about how we don't see things ourselves sometimes that others see in us. And I remember doing this exercise where I think 10 people had to give 5 adjectives that they would use to describe me. And it was amazing how many of them used the same word, even though they used different words, but there was a common theme or thread. And that can be really interesting as well.
Yes, I think for people to understand their strengths and their qualities is really hard for people. Another free tool, actually, 16 personalities, is lovely. It takes maybe 10 minutes to fill out. It gives you a personality profile that's grounded in Jungian archetypes or something. And it's got lots of neuroscience bedded in, and Maslow's hierarchy of needs, everything's in there. And I think maybe 2 million people have tried this out. So it's evidence-based. And you will pop out with a profile. Might be a campaigner, might be mediator, whatever. And it just reinforces, when people read it, it really reinforces their sense of self, because they can start to see their strengths and start to believe their strengths and their qualities. And so you're saying sort of ask people. That might be, it's different to asking people, but it's getting that sort of reassurance and confidence about yourself. Gosh, actually, I am good at this. I can do this, because people are naturally don't want to boast. Maybe that's something in the UK that happens, where we don't want to boast. And if I ask people, what do you like about yourself, they will get very, very shy. So self-confidence is built on knowing what your best qualities are. And if you can't actually identify them or talk about them, it's very difficult to be confident. So that's a really good way to feel confident and start looking at how you could look at different careers and revealing different identities that are going to work for you in the future. That's
lovely. And I think the other great thing about doing these tests, these personality tests as well, is they often articulate something about you that you know, but you just never knew how to say it like that.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
And I know I've added things into like my LinkedIn profile or my CV that I've taken from some of these tests that I've done over the years, because I would just never have framed it that way.
Yeah, absolutely. I remember one girl, she was sort of saying, I don't want to be known as someone who talks a lot. And just to reframe that, using the campaign sort of phrase was something about, you're extremely good at making connections. And she just felt so much better. So yeah, it's called 16 Personalities. I'm sure you'll put it up on.
I will. I'll put that in the show notes. Yeah. And the other one I really like is Values in Action, Character Strengths. Do you know that one? The VIA. Yeah, that's another one that I really like.
Yeah, absolutely. So there's a lot out there that you can research yourself and just give yourself a bit of a boost, give yourself a bit of a break, I would say, as well. You don't have to be this perfect person with the big, perfect career. let's use that multi-potentialite phrase, and let's just try different things and shine a different light on the wonderful diamond of your life, and shine it onto different people as well. Help other people to reveal their best self. And yeah.
Wow. It's a really, I feel like it's taken pressure off this conversation, because often we do feel pressure to know what we're going to do next or how we're going to get there, and we kind of get ahead of ourselves. But I think you've broken this down quite nicely into, these are a few things you can do while you're thinking.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. I mean, keep up the energy, keep up the motivation, but get the passion behind it, and look for your passions and work them out, and just accept that you might have different routes, and open up that framework to be positive and have a positive outlook.
And this is a funny question, but are you ever too old to pivot or to reinvent?
Well, this is an interesting question, isn't it? Because age is such a funny thing. I don't feel that we're ever too old to do anything. I never put my age down. When people ask me, I just feel it's, well, you'd never ask someone their salary, and I just think, there are people in their 80s doing degrees, doing masters. There are people pivoting really successfully in 50s, 60s, 70s, 80s. I just think you have got a wonderful life ahead of you. Let's do it now. Let's do it now and attract wonderful people, wonderful opportunities into your life, and keep that diamond glowing. Just keep polishing different facets, and it's a wonderful year that we can all start. It's 2022, isn't it? I mean, we can all start this fantastic year on the bright side.
Absolutely. And that just reminds me there, about this time 3 years ago, my dad, I went for his graduation. At 73, he completed a master's.
Amazing. Wow.
Yeah. So absolutely. I think so much is, what do you want to do? What would bring you joy? And even starting from there, it's like anything's possible.
And that's a really good exercise. That's a brilliant exercise. Write down now, whoever is listening to this, 10 things that make you happy, that give you joy. And just remind yourself, or even 100, go for it, go for broke. 100 things that give you joy. And you will feel, gosh, I've forgotten all this. And that's just a way to start adding these things into your life again.
Yeah, and it's building those moments in every day as well, isn't it? It's taking time every day to cultivate a bit of joy or gratitude or anything that is going to release those hormones that we talked about right at the beginning, especially if you can't get a surprise.
The happy hormones for a happy life, yes.
There we go. So Ella, if somebody would like to hear more from you or read more about you, how can they do that?
They can get in contact with me online, actually, or phone me up. I've got a website, Life Coaching with Ella. And if you just tap in Ella Clark Coach, I'll pop up on Instagram or LinkedIn or Facebook. So please just, if you want an informal chit chat, go for Ella Clark Coach.
Brilliant. A diamond conversation today. Plenty of sparkle and joy, and a really nice way to start. This is my first recording of 2022. So thank you for making it joyful.
Oh, thank you. It's been a real pleasure. Thank you, Susan.
Thank you for listening today. And if you enjoyed this episode, please share it with someone you know who would enjoy it too. I believe we are all entitled to enjoy our work, and the future of work life will be changed by those who put people first and create more fulfilling work lives for themselves, their colleagues, their teams and organisations. If you have any suggestions for topics you'd like to have covered, guests you'd like to hear from, or questions for me, please drop a line to susan@beyond-thenumbers.com. And finally, please consider leaving a review.